Harry Truman has gathered his cabinet to discuss what they should do with the atomic bombs they've developed, spending around $23 billion in today's equivalent for the Manhattan Project. The investment has seen results and they had the military capacity to use them for war. And so, he made a decision. Episode 2. It's August 6th, 1945. The B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, delivers 20,000 tons of TNT, all stored within a 3-meter, 4-ton bomb named Little Boy, to drop on Hiroshima, Japan. While the town has civilians residing in the area, the intention is to destroy the industrial center and the port there, that had been one of the epicenters of the war machine that was the Japanese Empire. On August 9th, another bomb named Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki, an industrial and naval repair center, with a total of 250,000 casualties for both bombs, most of whom were civilians. The Japanese, who had conducted their own nuclear weapons program but failed to develop a bomb, realized the magnitude of these explosives and the catastrophic damage it would have on the nation as a whole. Assured that it was not worth it to continue fighting a war they were already bound to lose, they announced their surrender on August 15th and officially signaled the end on September 2nd by signing the Potsdam Declaration with the caveat of the protection of Emperor Hirohito and the imperial system. For the next 7 years, the Allied powers, primarily the US and the UK, controlled the nation as it redeveloped into a democratic system, disbanded its army, and supported US interests in global politics. As it feared the spread of communism, the US government also ensured minimal Soviet influence during this occupation. Unlike the complete decimation and heaps of reparation fees placed on Germany following the First World War, Japan was intended to develop into a capitalist system which proved effective for the next few decades. Other consequences included the symbolic and political influence this move had on establishing the United States as a world power. If there's a winner from the Second World War, it has to be the US. It established the technological and intellectual superiority of the state, who was the first to develop nuclear weapons despite numerous projects by Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. They had won a war on 2 fronts, one in the European theater and the other in the Pacific, and they were the undoubted leader of the victorious Allied powers. Though most of the credit would have still been well deserved for the US, even with a land invasion, the atomic bomb was the nail in the coffin. Lastly, the arms race for the nuclear weapons began, with many countries including the Soviet Union, France, the United Kingdom, and China beginning nuclear projects. More recently, the list includes Israel, North Korea, India, and Pakistan. The destructive capabilities of nuclear weapons have been found to be world-changing, and previous military tactics have been rendered useless in such situations. If my enemy has a weapon, I would have to subdue to the rule the threat of such power unless I had one for myself. But what if Truman chose on that night not to use the atomic bomb? What would be the consequences? What kind of alternate future would we be living in? Let's go back. Let's rewind. It's August 6th, 1945. But Truman does not use the atomic bomb. Instead, he leads the Allied powers to invade Japan using Operation Downfall. Starting from Okinawa, they would head up to Kyushu and take control of the entire nation. Perhaps the negative consequences of the nuclear age could have then been avoided. By that time, Japan's loss was inevitable. Total war resources by the United States far exceeded the Japanese. But internal memos from the ministers of government and Kantaro Suzuki, the Prime Minister, showed plans to cause casualties to the Allied powers so great and horrific that it would force them to accept a ceasefire where Japan could keep colonies in Manchuria, in Korea, and the Pacific. In other words, they had no intention of surrendering, even after the war in the European theater had come to a close with Germany's surrender on May 7th. And that was readily clear to President Truman and his cabinet. At the Battle of Okinawa and the Battle of Iwo Jima, 2 victories for the Allied powers, casualties combined to reach 25,000 Allied deaths, with many more injured and military armament destroyed in the process. Brutal tactics such as civilian exploitation, kamikaze attacks, and the usage of civilians as meat shields have been reported. Any attack on the Japanese would warrant a huge casualty number on both sides. Predictors ranged, but casualties were easily in the millions. What would the people say if they realized such deaths could have been avoided? What would become of President Truman? He couldn't continue with such a costly land invasion, especially when they had another option. Furthermore, the Soviet plans on the occupation of Hokkaido would have become possible without US intervention. Comparing it to the invasion of Manchuria on August 9th, their full intention was to sap all natural resources from the region before retreating and returning the land back to Japan. That would have left most of Hokkaido in a hobbled and damaged state, with its coal deposits, fishing industry, and agricultural land valuable for the Japanese recovery. It was likely better for Japan that they had surrendered, since the loss was inevitable. But for the US, the bomb was critical to its superpower status and a country among the very elite in terms of technological development. Truman was not only thinking of the end of the Second World War, but the beginning of a face-off with the Soviet Union, and in retrospect, it was the first step of the Truman Doctrine, which stated the importance of communist containment. And the US had essentially taken the lead. Without such, they likely would have been met with a stalemate in Japan and a possible division of the state, just like Germany or South Korea. But the nuclear age might have progressed rather slowly. The usage of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked the only time in history it has been used in war. It signified that a bomb was necessary for self-defense as a deterrent to starting a nuclear war from the other side. As in a case in which two enemies both have nuclear weapons, there is no value in shooting at each other, as they'll only find the countries ravaged, a concept known as mutually assured destruction. So Pakistan and India, two historical enemies, and the USSR and the US, are examples of two face-offs in which both countries do possess nuclear weapons, but neither have ever used them against each other. In many aspects, the move was political and humanitarian. There were American and Japanese lives on the line, but there are consequences that we must live with in the nuclear age, as is with all human innovation.